There is a number in Wailord's file that is not merely wrong, it is impossible. For a long time, I thought that impossible number was the whole story. A cute lie, a giant made harmless on paper, a rounding error nobody bothered to fix. It isn't. It is the first thread of something much larger and much sadder. Because once you understand why the games gave the biggest creature in the world a weight that cannot be true, you understand what they were protecting us from. Not a monster, but a fact. The fact that this is a body that can only exist for as long as something else agrees to hold it up. Pull that thread, and you do not find a math mistake. You find a creature the ocean carries every second of its life, and you find what is waiting for it the moment the ocean lets go. This is a record the games left unfinished. The Wailord we are handed is gentle and weightless and safe. It is the float whale Pokémon. That is its name in the catalog. A vast, easygoing blue body that swims languorously in the vast open sea, swallowing whole schools of smaller creatures in a single, untroubled gulp. And the number that makes it feel harmless is its weight. 14.5 meters of animal, the largest ever catalogued, set down in the Pokédex at 398 kilograms. Less than a grand piano. Less than the boat the watchers sit in. A whale that could, in principle, be lifted on a forklift. Run that number, though, the way people have. A body more than 14 meters long, shaped like a whale, encloses a few hundred cubic meters of volume. Divide the listed weight by that volume, and Wailord comes out at a density of roughly 1 kilogram per cubic meter. The ordinary air around it is denser than that, which means the Pokédex has not described a heavy creature, or even a light one. It has described a creature lighter than air. If that number were true, Wailord would not drift on the surface of the sea. It would lift off it. 14 meters of blue body rising into the sky like an untethered blimp over the heads of the people who came to watch it until it was a dot, and then nothing. So the number is not a measurement. It is a decision, a weight chosen to make the largest creature in the world feel weightless, and the choosing of it quietly deleted the only question that mattered. If it does not really weigh that, what does it weigh? And what does that weight do to it? Strip the fiction away and listen to what the rest of the file insists is true. It insists on the size, the largest of all identified Pokémon, 14.5 meters, built like a blue whale down to the grooved throat. It insists the creature dives almost 10,000 feet on a single breath, deeper than any real whale that has ever lived, into pressures that would fold a human body shut. None of that describes something lighter than air. All of it describes the opposite, a body of immense, genuine mass. A real animal at that length does not weigh 300 kilograms. A blue whale, which the file openly says Wailord resembles, and which is smaller than Wailord, weighs more than 100,000. The honest weight of a true Wailord is a number with 5 or 6 digits in it, a weight the Pokédex was never willing to write down, because the moment you write it down, the float whale stops floating, and the gentle giant becomes a creature so heavy that only an entire ocean can hold it up. This is not in the Pokédex. This is simply what a body that size is. And here is the part that turns the dread into something closer to grief. It did not start that size. Every Wailord was once a Wailmer, the ball whale Pokémon, a small, round, almost comical thing, barely larger than a person, that bobs at the surface like a buoy and spouts water through its nose. A creature small enough to be carried, small enough to be cute without a lie attached. And then it grows. It eats and it grows and it keeps growing, and there is no point at which it stops and chooses to stay a manageable size. It swells year over year toward the largest body in the world, which means that from the moment it is born, a Wailord is on a one-way journey, getting heavier, getting vaster, becoming more and more completely a thing that belongs only to the deep and can never again belong anywhere else. It does not know that. It is just growing the way everything grows. But every kilogram it adds is another kilogram the sea will have to carry for it, and another kilogram that will be waiting all at once on the day it ever touches land. There is something quietly merciless in that design. Nothing else about Wailord is cruel, but its own growth is a trap that closes so slowly the creature never feels it close. The small, round thing that could once have been scooped out of the shallows by a single trainer becomes, over years of doing nothing but living, a body the entire ocean must labor to hold, and one the land would kill in an afternoon. It is not punished for anything. It simply gets bigger, and the bigger it gets, the fewer places in the world will have it, until there is only one place left that can hold it, and, in the end, only one place it can die well. Before we get to that day, you have to understand what kind of creature we are talking about, because the cruelty of the ending depends entirely on the gentleness of the thing it happens to. Wailord is, by every line in its own file, the most harmless, enormous creature ever imagined. It has almost no natural enemies. Nothing in the sea is large enough or foolish enough to challenge a body that size. And the things that do hunt its kind hunt only the small, round young. It hurts nothing. It is a filter feeder. The massive amounts of food it swallows are clouds of tiny drifting plankton, taken in by the school in a single open-mouthed pass. It does not stalk. It does not kill. The most violent thing it does is leap, throwing its whole impossible bulk clear of the surface and crashing back down for reasons that look, from a boat, a great deal like joy. And it is not alone. Wailord travels in pods. The file is quietly tender about this. When one of the young is threatened, the entire pod turns as one to surround it and shield it. They move together, feed together, cross the open ocean together. People take boats out specifically to find them. Wailord watching, a real pastime in that world, the way whale watching is in ours. And what they go to see is the biggest, gentlest animal in the sea breaching against the sky. There is one strange, telling line in the file about how people treat them. When a pod grows too large and eats too much, the fishermen do not hunt them, and do not fight them. They simply drive them off, shoo them away, the way you would chase something harmless out of a garden. That is the measure of how little threat Wailord poses, even at its enormous size. The worst thing it ever does to anyone is eat too many fish in one stretch of sea, and the worst anyone ever does back is ask it firmly to leave. A creature that vast, and the entire human response to it is a waving of arms. That is the creature. No enemies, no malice. A vast, social, playful thing that spends its life protecting its family and frightening no one. Hold on to that. It is about to be the thing that makes the rest unbearable. So, what happens to a Wailord that beaches? The Pokédex never tells us, and we know now why it never told us. It never wrote the weight, so it never had to write the consequence of the weight. But the consequence is not a mystery. It is biology. And it is the same for any body built at that scale that finds itself out of the water. This part is real. None of it is invented. In the sea, that true weight is nothing. A submerged body is pushed upward by a force equal to the weight of the water it displaces, and a body the size of Wailord displaces an ocean. So all that mass, tens of thousands of kilograms of it, simply hangs, weightless, held. The sea is not where Wailord lives. The sea is the only reason Wailord can hold its own shape. Take the water away, and the mass does not go anywhere. It presses down, all of it at once, onto a frame that was never built to bear it in open air. There is nothing left to distribute the load. The weight settles onto the creature's own lungs until it can no longer pull a full breath. Its organs begin to fail under a burden the sea had carried for the whole of its life. And because a body that large cannot shed heat into air the way a small one can, it begins at the same time to overheat from the inside. It does not drown. There is air all around it. It suffocates beneath itself, slowly, fully awake, unhurt by any enemy, for hours. And the cruelest part is how little it takes. A creature this size does not come ashore because it made a mistake it could have avoided. In our world, whales strand for reasons that are almost entirely innocent. A navigational sense thrown off by the shape of a coastline or a shift in the planet's magnetic field. An illness or an injury that makes the deep impossible to hold. A sick leader the rest of the pod trusts and follows. A chase after prey that draws them, without their noticing, into water too shallow to turn in. There is no villain in a stranding. There is only a vast, trusting animal that followed something. Instinct, family, hunger, a failing sense of where the deep water was, to the one place its own body cannot survive, and understood it too late, if it understood at all. And then there's the detail I did not want to find, and cannot leave out. Whales do not always strand alone. In our world, one of the reasons whole pods come ashore together is the very thing that makes them worth loving. They will not leave one another. When a single member is sick or injured or lost or driven the wrong way by something it cannot understand, the others do not abandon it. They follow it, into the shallows, onto the sand, out of the only place any of them can survive. Because the pull to stay with the pod is older and stronger than the instinct to save themselves. Now put that beside what the Pokédex tells us about Wailord, that it lives in pods and that when one of its own is in danger, the whole pod turns to shield it. I cannot tell you the games ever showed this, but if Wailord's pods behave as the record says they behave, and as real whales do, then a beached Wailord is, too often, not a single tragedy. It is a family. One comes ashore, and the others follow, one after another, and lie down beside it on the sand, and each of them, in turn, is crushed by its own weight, suffocating in the open air beside the ones it spent its whole life protecting. None of them will leave. That is the point. The gentlest creatures in the sea, killed not by a predator, not by a rival, not by anything that wished them harm, but by their own size and their own loyalty. Picture what that actually looks like from the water's edge. Not a single stranded animal, but a row of them, the whole family, laid along the sand in the order they came in. The largest, perhaps, the one that was sick. The rest, the ones who would not let it go in alone. The pod that turns as one to shield its young, turning as one toward the thing that kills them, because to them, those are not two different instincts. They do not understand the beach. They understand only that they do not leave. Held to the light, even this changes. The friendly little number was never a fact about Wailord. It was mercy, a weight light enough to keep us from ever picturing the beach. Act 6, the open file. But there is another ending. It happens far from any shore where no one watches, and it turns the whole story over. When a Wailord dies where it belongs, out in the deep, in the water that held it its entire life, it does not wash up, it sinks, down past the light, past the warm upper sea, past even the 10,000-foot depth it could reach on a single breath, all the way to the cold floor at the bottom of the world. And the floor of the deep ocean is, for the most part, a desert. Almost nothing grows there. The little that lives at that depth survives on a thin, constant drizzle of scraps drifting down from far above. Never enough, never reliable. A perpetual near famine in the dark. Onto that desert, the body too heavy for the land arrives as the single most generous thing the deep will ever receive. This is real, and it has a name, a whale fall. And what follows is not decay so much as a slow, years-long act of giving. First, for as long as 2 years, scavengers come, some traveling for miles through the black, drawn by the impossible scent of that much food in a place that has so little. And they strip the soft body down. Then smaller things move in, worms and crustaceans colonizing the bones and the enriched sediment around them, and among them, a creature that exists almost solely for this, Ossidax, the bone-eating worm, which sinks roots into the skeleton and feeds on the bone itself. And then comes the longest stage of all. For decades, sometimes most of a century, nearly as long as the creature was alive, bacteria break down the fat still locked inside the bones, releasing chemicals that feed an entire community of mussels and worms and clams that can live nowhere else, in the same way the strange life around deep-sea vents does. And it does something stranger still than feed them. The deep sea's pockets of life, the scalding vents, the cold chemical seeps, are scattered across the dark floor like islands, separated by vast empty stretches the creatures clinging to them could never cross alive. A whale fall lands in between, and for the decades it lasts, it becomes a stepping stone, a place where life from one distant oasis can settle, take hold, and send its young drifting on toward the next. The body does not only feed the deep, it connects it. Scientists believe that at any given moment, there are hundreds of thousands of these falls resting on the world's ocean floors, each one a temporary island of the living in a desert of the dark, and that the great whales, in dying, have been quietly stitching the deep sea together for as long as there have been great whales. One body, one vast, gentle, impossible body, holding up a whole world of life in the one place that should have none. Sit with the shape of that. In life, Wailord cannot bear its own weight. It can only exist because the sea carries it. And in death, that same unbearable weight becomes the gift. It sinks into the deep that always held it, and the deep at last takes it all the way in and turns the heaviest thing in the world into decades of life for the dark. The creature that hurt nothing and frightened no one, that spent its days breaching for joy and shielding its young, gives one final thing, larger than anything it gave while alive, a feast that outlasts it by half a century in the emptiest place there is. It is hard not to read something almost deliberate into that symmetry, even knowing there is no author down there arranging it. The creature that could only ever take from the world above, taking the sea's support, taking the plankton, taking the shelter of the pod, turns out to be the one that gives the most in the end, and gives it to the part of the world that no one watches and no one mourns. Its life is held up by the ocean. Its death holds the ocean up in return. We go out in boats to watch the biggest body in the sea leap into the light. That is the Wailord we keep. We never follow it down. We never see the beach, where its own weight and its own loyalty undo it in the open air. And we certainly never see the floor of the world, where that same weight becomes the most generous thing the abyss will ever know. The Pokédex gave it a number light enough to float, so that the watching would stay beautiful and we would never have to do the arithmetic. But the real weight, the one it carries, the one the sea carries for it, the one that crushes it on land and feeds the deep in death, was always the whole story. The file stays open